Welcome, everybody. We really appreciate you joining us today. My name is Caroline Cummings. I'm the Executive Director of Oregon Rain. And without further ado, I'm excited to introduce you to Seth Tibbott, founder and chairman of Tofurky. So let me tell you just a quick note about Seth. He started his business in 1980 with only $2,500 in savings. And sure, he struggled the first few years, as many of us do when we're starting businesses. And 7 of the years that he was running his business, he actually built and lived in a treehouse, which was pretty fantastic. I heard you on NPR talking about it, and I just thought, wow, that's something I need to put on my bucket list. And you were only living off of $300 a month in savings. And I know that you're not publicly talking about revenue, but we've seen online in different sources that you've now grown this business to over an estimated 40 million in sales, which is super impressive. And in 1995, you first introduced and marketed the first vegan holiday roast called the Tofurky that we all now know and love. And your brand has now expanded into 35 different vegan products and is sold in 27,000 stores across the nation. It's pretty spectacular. We're honored to have you here. Thank you so much, Seth. I'm now going to turn it over to you. And I know that you have some slides that you would like to share at all. So take it away, Seth.
All right. Well, so great to have everybody here. Let me find there we go. Okay. And we should be on the slideshow. Okay. Thanks for coming, everybody. I'm Seth Tibbott, and I've got a few slides for you to share today. We're going to start out. I'm just going to give you an overview of the Tofurky Company very quickly. And then I'm going to go through about 7 slides that'll tell you some of the survival strategies that we've come up with that are the core of what we have done to manage the COVID-19 crisis at Tofurky, which has been an amazing struggle to keep up with because we've had a lot of big orders that have come our way, and at the same time we're having to in real time readjust all of our production lines to make sure that everybody's safe. And so far it's been a successful couple of months, but it's been a daily moving target, as I'm sure all of you are familiar with. So this is the Tofurky Company, which was founded, like Carolyn was saying, in 1980 on $2,500. This is the Hope Co-op down here in the bottom right here. And that was where I rented out a night kitchen for $25 a month, where I could make 100 pounds of tempeh every night. And that lasted for about a year. I got a little more distribution and moved up here to the Husum School, which was a abandoned elementary school in Husum, Washington, which is about 75 minutes east of Portland and 10 minutes north of Hood River. And that was where, a mile and a half away, is from the school, where I built my 3-story treehouse in order to keep my overhead low, or high in this point, I guess. And I lived there for 7 years and moved the business over to Hood River. In 1995, I introduced Tofurky to the co-ops and natural food stores of Portland and Seattle and a little bit in California. We sold 818 Tofurky feasts that year, and then moved on to have now 43 vegan products sold in 27,000 stores worldwide. And we have about 210 employees, all in Hood River, which is we have 3 buildings there, 2 manufacturing facilities and 1 logistics center. And that is our home, where we make 95% of our products are all made there. So this is a fully launched spaceship at this point. And, I stepped down from CEO, president to let my stepson, Jamie, handle this 5 years ago, and he's done a fantastic job of organizing and getting a really top-notch organization and group of people there. So I know we have people from other fully launched businesses that have been business for a while, and then we probably have some startups too, based on the questions that I've seen. So we'll have time to discuss the needs of both. So if you're just starting out, don't feel afraid about asking questions that are more relevant to your particular situation. And we'll do that in a minute. And yeah, as mentioned, a lot of the early stories of my startup years are in this book, which is more about the struggles and the failures and the funny stuff that happened along the way, with selling to the Rajneesh, renting classrooms to circus clowns in the school, and just having a very kind of, somebody called it the electric Kool-Aid acid test of tempeh. And it's a lot of good stories, and we will raffle off 3 of those books at the end of this, and they're available on Amazon, indie booksellers, and wherever fine books are sold, or maybe one shelf further down, fine books, but close. Anyways, so our experience with the COVID crisis happened on February 29th, when we were prepared to go down to the Natural Products Expo West show, which, as many of you know, the biggest natural food show, I believe, in the world. And there's 90,000 people coming to this show every year from all over the world. And so we were all on pins and needles. But at that point, the show was still scheduled to start on Thursday of that week. And on Saturday of that week, Jamie looked at it and said, you know, even though the Anaheim regulatory health department say the show can go on, you know, because they hadn't had a lot of sickness at that point, Jamie looked at it and he said, you know, the risk is really too high. And we discussed it, and I agreed. And so we canceled the show, which was about a $80,000 investment, because we had 2 booths that were ready to go and introduce a new product line for us. We had a lot invested, but we felt like the risk was just too high to our employees who could get sick or quarantine. So hitting it early was really a good call, because 2 days later, the whole show collapsed under its own weight and it never happened. But that, you know, we jumped on the ban of travel to that show, and we said no more travel for business. We also said, you know, that there can't be any visitors unless it's really approved by an upper level management. So we shut down the plant for anybody that wasn't an employee. So getting a start, and, you know, having Jamie's vision of, you know, he's a neuroscience PhD candidate from University of Washington. So he understood, I think, what was going to happen here. So that was really a good start at the first. Right after that, that very first week, we established a COVID-19 committee to plan and direct communication of what we were going to do. And this included the heads of all of our department, including marketing, sales, CEO, logistics, and production. And at first, there was so much information coming out every day, and things were changing, that we met daily and were informing people as we went along what changes we were going to make. We're now down to meeting 2 times a week, and there's blogs that we'll get to in a minute, but it also, Jamie puts out a summary, an executive summary on Fridays to the whole company that everybody reads. So having the plan in place and communication early were just an amazing help. So then we noticed that soon all of our retail customers were ordering huge amounts of product. You know, we are mostly a retail company as opposed to a food service company, although we were planning to expand in food service. But with these orders coming in, orders were like double of what they normally were because people were just eating at home and not eating out so much. So there was that demand, and there was the hoarding of products. So we had to, in real time, quickly adjust the manufacturing plant to incorporate a 6-foot barrier between people at all times, which you can see up here in this photo over here of the red barriers that we erected. Anywhere there was going to be people that just had to be close to each other, we still tried to get 6 feet as much as we could. And then we put actual barriers in place throughout the plant. We had a 10 max rule, which is meaning that no more than 10 people could be in a meeting or a lunchroom or any place at one time. So we took out all but 10 chairs from the lunchroom. We staggered shifts, we staggered lunches so that we could accommodate this. We staggered meetings. And then we also implemented this 1-minute rule, which meant if you did have to, for some reason, violate the 6-foot rule or go into a meeting where there's 10 max, you only could do that for 1 minute. And that meant that if somebody had been on the production floor identified as COVID positive, we would have gone back and looked at the tape because we have cameras that we were looking at all of the production, and we could tell. We were going to say anybody that had been in contact with this person for 1 minute will have to quarantine. So thankfully that didn't happen. But and then in all of our meetings, we had also the 6-foot rule in the plant. So that was our number one thing that we kept harping on more than anything, because COVID is a respiratory disease, and that's the major way that you can encounter it. Working from home, I know this is pretty obvious, but anybody that could work from home was immediately assigned to work from home where they could. And most people that did it, they would still come in for a day or two as needed into the office. But working from home has become really huge for us. It was a learning curve, but now that we've had experience with it, it's really become like the air we breathe and second nature almost to us. So I think going forward, that is going to remain an option that we'll be looking at in the future. We also did online surveys to just see how comfortable the staff was and how safe they felt. And these were great. This is an example of one online survey of the staff that we did. We were asking, how prepared are you to deal with a coronavirus infection if you, a coworker, or someone in your household contracted the virus? We asked, is your management team communicating to you enough about the coronavirus and changes that we were making at Tofurky? Interesting enough, a lot of people felt we were over communicating to people, which, as Fosse is famous to say, if you think you're overdoing it, you're probably doing it about right. And so we just wanted to make sure that we were really communicating to everybody there the changes that we had. And then we also wanted input on which nonprofits that you would like the company to donate product to. And we found several local food banks and senior homes that were actually really needing food that people brought, and they had some really good ideas, and it really helped them become vested in the whole process. So involving the people in decision making was really great, and we got a lot of good feedback. We have this return to work policy where if you did, while we didn't have anybody test positive, in fact, Hood River has only had 11, I think, known cases in the county. we did have a return to work policy. If you had, there was people that had symptoms, like 2 or 3 of the symptoms, and they were never sure. And so the return to work policy for those people or anybody was you could get a return to work note from your doctor, or you were symptom free for 72 hours with no COVID related symptoms without medication. That means no fever, no cough, etc. And then the other thing was you could wait 10 days from the onset of symptoms, then return to work and wear a face mask. And you have a fever. If you have a fever, this is not an option. So all of these policies were developed in close cooperation with the Hood River Health Authority. And each option has a something that goes along with it. Number 1 assumes that your doctor is going to make the decision. Number 2 allows enough time to pass so that you aren't transmitting the disease. And number 3 was you were just not sure whether you had COVID or not, and you just were taking the time to assess your symptoms, but you needed 10 days on that. We had informational blogs that went up. This committee was good about detailing information. There's much more information on the return to work policy there. There was blogs that anybody could access about how to make face masks at Tofurky at your home, how to sew them, what happens if an employee has a positive test for COVID-19, in which case we would immediately have shut down the plant and sanitized everything and let it sit for a period of, I think it was 3 days. That didn't happen, but it was just trying to show people, here's the plan. Then we just had, coronavirus COVID FAQs as much as we could find from reliable sources, and the CDC. I think anybody that's been on Facebook has seen Dr. Pimple Popper as one of the experts that some people were quoting. We didn't quote her, but we were trying to distill the facts as best we could. And then caring for yourself during a COVID-19 outbreak, how to do that at home and what you could expect. And then what are the policy changes in response to COVID-19? We changed some of our paid time off policies to make it easier for people to not only have time off if they were sick, but if a lot of these people had partners who had been displaced from a job and had kids at home, so they needed more time with that, and they could get time off for family needs too. We pay everybody's health insurance, and there was special benefits that we had for the COVID pandemic. Okay, before we get into that, so that's kind of like the 30,000 foot overview of what we have done at Tofurky. And Carolyn, I guess we could open it up if anybody has any specific questions about this. Before I go into detail, there was 11 of you, thank you very much, who wrote your specific questions about what you were concerned with that I'm going to answer next. And after every one of those, we'll have a discussion time too. But Carolyn, do you want to bring on anybody if anybody has questions?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions starting to come in. I'll ask you one of them, and then you can maybe move into the ones that you have. And then as people post them, I'll let you know if any come up. But first one is, what influenced your decision to move the business to Hood River from Washington?
It was the availability of space. Going across the river to Husum was really an odd place for trucks to come to. We really couldn't get very many people for supplies in, and also shipping out of Husum, was a very difficult job. Like even when we moved to Hood River, which had, it was like right on the freeway. Our first plant in Hood Rivers was right on the freeway. In the early days of Tofurky, it was a hard challenge to get truckers to come up even to Hood River to pick up, because it would be like 1 or 2 pallets of product. And so it was really more of access, and we had outgrown the school system. The little school building that I was in a town with limited water, and people were calling me up and saying, would you mind not washing your pots and pans right now, because I want to take a shower. I was like, oh, maybe we should move. So we moved over to Hood River to a more industrial space, and that was a really positive move.
Great. And a couple of the other questions I know were already submitted ahead of time. So if you want to just jump into responding to those, that would be great.
Okay, let's go with the first question that somebody asked, and they said, how are we addressing social distancing in manufacturing space to keep employees safe while maintaining efficiencies? Great question. We had, as I said, like a huge ramp up in like right overnight, orders, which is really tricky to deal with, because if you're ramping up gradually, it's one thing, but then all of a sudden having to make twice as much product as you had in the past, it was really a challenge to do that and to do it safely. But the first thing was that we've talked about was implementing that 6 foot max 10 and 1 minute rule, which was really the crux of everything that we did, and that got implemented almost right away, which was really good, because I know that there's been other companies in our space that didn't do that quickly enough, and they actually had to shut down the whole plant for, I think it was a week and a half, and that's just really a unfortunate situation from every angle. But doing that and doing it early was good. We hired additional cleaning staff, and this is like, the crux of everything too. It's just like, people were just going all over the plant with sanitizing doorknobs that hadn't even been touched, like every 20 minutes, and just any sort of food contact surface or personal contact surface in everything from the locker rooms to the restrooms to the production floor, the lunchroom. It was all being just cleaned and kept like super intense cleaning. And then, overnight we upgraded our overnight clean when no one was in the plant too. And we encourage people to stay home if sick, with a paid time off policy. And then also there was people like getting the Family Leave Act, because like I know one woman in our QA department was living with her grandma, and she didn't want to expose her grandma to this, so she took paid time off and then got some Family Leave Act money for that too. So we, if you didn't have paid time off saved, you could borrow it, or we would extend it to people. So we really wanted people to feel like they didn't have to come to work if they were feeling sick. And our attest was actually pretty good to this, that it topped out. I think one time we had maybe 10%, and people call in to our line and about half of those were really, it wasn't like illness, it was more like, hey, family needs that I have to take care of at home. So that was good. We bumped up our salary review from July to April because we wanted people to have more money now. It was just a hard time for a lot of families. Going from 2 incomes to 1 income. So we bumped up the salary review and bumped up the actual amount that we were giving to, just to make sure that people could have a little extra money in this time. We removed chairs from the meeting rooms to only allow 10 people, and we taped the floor. We've gone over that. But that was, a really key one. Like these chairs just don't move out of their little taped area, so that it really mandates that. We put tape on the floor throughout the plant as well to really enforce social distancing. We erected barriers, and just this enhanced level of intercompany communications with employees, I think, was really key, and that's something that I think is really going to future, because I think we learned better communication skills through this. So that is how we addressed the manufacturing environment. Are there any questions?
Yes, you have a ton of questions coming in, Seth. And here's what's great is you're talking to food entrepreneurs and they want to really mine your brain. So they're asking some detailed, specific questions. And I'm going to ask a few. Let me know if you're okay with answering these.
Yeah, sure.
Lucinda, who has a great food company out in Depot Bay, Oregon, she keeps running into brokers that want to charge her like $2,000 a month until the commissions kick in. Are there still brokers out there who will work on a percentage with a smaller retainer, sort of like the good old days?
Um, I don't know if that's a new policy for. In the early days of making tempeh in Husum, I ran into that all the time. And even when Tofurky was starting too, there was always this sort of, and $2,000, I think I saw as $5,000 broker minimum. So some of that is up for negotiation, but you kind of get what you pay for a lot of times in the brokerage. The ones that feel like they can really do that, and that they can bring that kind of value eventually, require that. So in a way, it's a good thing, because they see you as being a potential brand that'll bring in that money or more. But I would certainly try and negotiate that out. And the more power your brand has and the more work that you've done, another way to deal with that is to bring into the conversation that the sales work that you've done, like if you've done any work in that sector, or maybe you could say, we are going to call stores and we are going to do demos, and this is going to create more wealth down the road for everybody. So like, I know there's people that even hire people to go around to stores and look for holes where you could fill the gaps that are in there. So I think it's all up for negotiation. We've actually cut down a lot of our brokerage fees from 5% down to 3%. So because of the strength of the brand, so it's definitely worth a shot.
Great, thanks, Seth. Here's another one. I know you've got a bunch in your slide deck too, but it's really great to be engaging with these food entrepreneurs. This one's from Aida, and she owns a food business out of Bonita. Delicious foods, by the way. And she's actually wanting to buy a commercial space. This will be the first time for her. And she's sort of wondering what's a good size for a kitchen. She believes it would be 30 by 50 feet, but it has a separate office and storage. And Aida, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to share with Seth a little bit more about the food that you're making, because he might need to know that to answer that question.
Sure, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
we can hear you.
Good. Okay. I do fresh salsas, tomato-less, vegan, gluten-free salsas, and I'm going to be co-packing it so it would be shelf stable. And so that's where I'm at right now.
Okay. I would say get about twice as much space as you think you'll need right now, and sublet it out if necessary on a month-to-month or a shorter time period, and which allows you to grow into the space. I mean, one of the bummers is if you under value how much space you're going to need if you make that estimate. And then you're stuck with having to do the same kind of process. Moving is a hassle. You don't want to do it more than you can. You know, we were lucky. We moved from Hewsum to Hood River. We moved into a 26,000 square foot building, and we had 5,000 square feet of that building because that's all we needed. In fact, we couldn't even think of how we would use all of that. So I rented um, about half of that to a yoga teacher who had yoga classes in there, and that was great. And then we moved into that when we needed it. And as people left throughout the building, we took over their space, and then we ended up buying the building eventually. So I would just recommend making sure that you have space to grow, because moving's a hassle.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Beth. So you can go on to the next one, because I think your next one has to do with accounts payables, accounts receivables, and someone was
Right.
asking about that.
Right. So what tools and systems are you using to manage cash flow and negotiate AP and AR? That's a great question. And I ran that by Carly, who is our, handles that. She's our comptroller. And she reviewed credit insurance on all international and some domestic customers. If you have a high risk customer, there is credit insurance that you can buy. We have it on all our international accounts because we don't really have leverage to go over there and demand payment. And then domestic customer that we looked at, and if they looked like they were in arrears a little bit or slow to pay before COVID, we said, oh, well, this is really going to be maybe a problem down the road. So we actually purchased extra insurance as needed. And you can even buy short-term insurance of just 90 days, which is what we did for several of these. You can always extend that, but you don't want to have that be paying that insurance when things are kind of normalized. So for a situation like this, I do recommend short-term insurance. And we just in general performed a higher level of AR review, just looking for trends on everything. It wasn't really rocket science. It was all kind of done in Excel, and she had this big spreadsheet that she uses for AR. And with most of our customers are retailers, and they're not in food service. That really helped us quite a bit, because retailers were just having gonzo sales, whereas food service was really struggling. So I think customers had a bigger part of their line, food service, were really hit harder, and which goes to the point and underscores the point that it's really good to have different avenues of revenue stream, balanced out between food service, retailers, mass, natural, specialty, international, which weather storms. And then on the AP side, we have held off on promotions. Why would you do promotions when there's such a high demand, and customers themselves were not really able to fulfill these commitments to promote, because grocery stores were just scrambling to keep product on the shelf. And so really a time when people weren't looking for value too. They were just looking, I gotta get this food for my family, and I'm not price sensitive right now, so I'm not gonna look for special promotions. So that really allowed us to have a better cash flow on this and to pay everyone on time. I will say that we've been in business 40 years, so it hasn't always been this way. In the past 2 years, we've had scale up issues. There's been a big move to these kind of products, which makes growth is expensive, and we had to install new equipment and buy new equipment, and just ramping up production is very expensive. So negotiation, we've had to really negotiate with our partners, and we came out of it, okay, just by being proactive and telling people if there was going to be a slow payment, and agreeing to pay a little more for that if needed. But it helped extend out and keep the relationship alive by just being sort of proactive. So, and I know that that's often a problem, certainly for startups, because you're just getting off the ground and going, just like it was sort of a new business for us, growing from X level of sales to Y level of sales in this past 2 years. So luckily, we had done all of our revamp. We had to borrow $7 million to vamp our production lines, and all the equipment had just kind of gone in at the end of last year. So we were real ramped up and suited. We could make these big orders happen. Okay, question.
Yeah, there's some other ones coming in. I think some of them you're addressing later, but might as well jump on them now. What's been sort of the biggest disruptor for you? I think I remember recalling you saying you were about to launch a new vegan cheese and some new products at the food show. So how are you guys handling that?
Yeah, so I don't know if that's the next question or not. That was I guess that's the supply chain. But we're going to launch Mooch cheese, vegan cheese line that we've been working on for 5 years. And we had a Tofurky booth and a Mucho booth. Cheese under the Tofurky brand didn't really make sense, Tofurky cheese. So we invented the new brand Mucho. And whereas, it's not dead, it's not stillborn, it's really going to happen, but we've had to put that off until the fall is the earliest at this point that we'll get it. But we're still building up sales at. We're, a lot of these buyers that we've been dealing with are actually at home. So we've been sending cheese samples to their house, actually, and then having the Zoom call like this with them. So that's been a big disruption. So then we've had to look at how else we were going to make up that revenue. And luckily, with the retail business being so strong right now, we've been able to do that. We were also going to make a big push into food service, and that is not really a hot and heading category now. So we've had to lay off those plans. So, just being nimble as a company and being able to think strategically has been a real plus that I think we've come out of this with, because really it's been the focus for us this past 2 months has just been on making more of our sort of wheelhouse products that have been in the market for a long time, deli slices and sausage and stuff.
Right, and we might as well stick with the supply chain since that was a question as well.
Yeah, so what disruptions in the supply chain have affected our business? And this is from Jean Nestorek, our VP of logistics, and she said the number one challenge at first was just getting frontline ingredients like gloves and sanitizers. We're lucky that we're right next door to the Hood River Distillery, and they have alcohol. So they actually were creating sanitizer for us. So that was a big thing, but we didn't really see a lot of supply chain disruption through this whole time because we jumped on it early with good supplier relationships, and we were locking materials early and lines of communication open with them. It's like we still can't get normal gloves, so more for these now, but not a huge disruption. But with panic buying, one of the things that we did see was we shipped to all these distribution houses and storage houses all over the country, and with them bringing in more products to meet the demand, with the grocery stores selling twice as much stuff as they ordinarily would, there became this problem of storage. There wasn't enough, especially chilled storage for us there. So we had to jiggle trucks, deliveries, and POs around. And that was kind of a nightmare. But I think all in all, we really benefited from our mantra to always buy locally where possible and not bring in cheaper packaging and materials from overseas. We've never brought in, for instance, organic soybeans from China just because we were never sure of the veracity of the paperwork and the certification. And, it's tempting to always look for cheaper packaging and materials, but in this case, having not switched around and having these long-term relationships, they really helped us. And that was really their message of the supply chain for this was, having good, strong relationships with our customers over time.
Great. Thank you, Seth. Here's another question that's about sort of in the kitchen behind the scenes. How have you guys adjusted to the rise in food allergies, with wheat, corn, soy, nuts, and so forth?
Yeah. We've had to, well, gluten has been the toughest one because we have gluten in a lot of our products. And then we have like the tempeh, and I think it's the Tofurky grounds that are not are gluten-free, and so we had to go through a certification process. But all the allergens, are clearly measured throughout the plant. We have this computerized system that it tracks ingredients all through the production process, and all of the allergens are separated and clearly marked so that they can't be, you just can't make a recipe with an allergenic problem because the computers won't let you do that. So it's really been a learning experience, and our attention to allergens is a lot less than Europe and the United Kingdom and other countries' attention to allergens. For instance, at all the trade shows that you go to over in the UK, there's an allergen team that goes around to every booth. And if you don't have your allergens and your samples clearly marked, they'll shut you down or fine you, or, it's just really throughout the whole process of not just selling, but of making products. We learned from the international business that we're doing, we learned more about how to really pay closer attention to allergens. So it shows, now when we're sampling, we're doing that, even though we hardly ever see it over here.
All right.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and stick with your next question.
Have we discovered anything during this crisis that we will do differently to improve Tofurky? I've already mentioned understanding how remotely tools has improved and how we can continue to do more remote working from home. That's going to be an asset. I think, Andy, our CFO, he says he just has a room in his house. He has kids, but he feels like he's much more efficient working from home than in the office where he has more distractions. With the fall of the Expo West show, we figured out new strategies to do sales calls that involve less travel. We've sent, in the past, like one time I remember we sent, I think it was 2 salespeople to Walmart headquarters in Arkansas, which is really hard to get to from Portland. And they had to stay overnight. They had couple of days of travel, and then they had this meeting, and in the middle of the meeting the buyer goes, "Oh, can you excuse me for a minute and talk to my assistant buyer?" And I have another call, and he goes out and he comes back in 10 minutes later and says, "I'm not your buyer anymore. You're going to have to make another appointment to come back here." And you go, "Wow, I mean, look at the expense of that." So being more familiarity with remote, I think it's a plus for the buyer too. I mean, they don't have to do all of the meetings with people in person and show them around and take them to the office, check them in and all that. It just is a streamlined system right now. So I think we'll be doing more of the remote buying and just sending the samples in before us, which is a lot cheaper than sending people around. And it's better for everybody, including the planet. So less travel. And then just the internal communication game in the company has really been upgraded, and that's like awesome to see. So I think those are really the big things that we take away. Questions? Okay.
Hey, Seth, sorry, this is Raj. I apologize. I did have a follow-up question there. On the comment about increasing the amount of remote sales calls that you do, I'm curious if you anticipate that that'll create any challenges with the relationships that those sales reps will have to build with the buyers.
And we're pretty new to this, Raj. That's a good question. I mean, and that's how I'm really curious to see how shows will survive this, like, because the shows have been so important. But when you look at it, and you send $80,000 out of your marketing budget on that, and that's how the shows are selling the product to you too, is they're saying, well, you'll have face-to-face relationships. You can call and talk on the phone all you can, but there's value in that face-to-face relationship. I'm not sure that's the case now anymore. I mean, time will tell. I think there will always be an intrinsic value to that, but I think especially some of the younger buyers now that are more familiar with these remote tools will sort of jump on the chance to be more efficient and to meet salespeople. Because really, in a sales call, you're telling your advantages, you're explaining your promotional program, you're saying why they should carry it, you're presenting your sales data. I mean, it's all stuff that can be done remotely, really. And then they have the samples, they've tried it before your call. I think it has a really good chance of being, or maybe you only go once a year to this client instead of 2 or 3 times a year to do that. But I don't know. What do you think? Our, we're all in the big, who knows section right now.
Phase, yeah. And I know we're coming up on time here, and just for everybody on the call, Seth said he would hang out for about 10 minutes after 3 o'clock. But there are 2 questions that I know you have in the deck if you want to move forward to those, because they've also been asked. One is people really want to know about your sales channels, how they've been impacted.
Yeah.
And I think you have that towards the end. And then,
okay.
And then some general advice for food startups, what you think they should be doing.
We'll move through to those. Have we had to pivot any aspect of our business as a result of COVID-19? Yeah, we've talked about the Mucho line that we pivoted. We've talked about the food service plans. And we have also a new plant-based burger launching in stores that has slowed down, but is going forward. Buyers are now cautiously taking a breath and finding time to meet and do things. So there are some openings happening now. Definitely, again, being nimble and being able to change plans is what you got to do there. What have we learned the most as a result of this experience? Don't take anything or anybody for granted. Not that we really did before, but I think that, this whole experience has just been a mind blower to me, seeing how things that we didn't even think twice about being able to do is now suddenly not an option. Flying around the world or travel, anywhere, and just looking at just really a new set of eyes onto the world. And then just, we've talked about relationships, staying nimble. And I think the world, I love to see that the word hero has really been redefined to shine the spotlight on the people that are not often seen as heroes. I mean, whoever thought, like, some of the most heroic people are the clerks in the stores that are filling the shelves, that are checking out your groceries, that are making the products at Tofurky on the floor. And, I mean, everybody thinks of heroes as the managers or the president or CEO or, Elon Musk, whatever, but it's really, I think the first responders, the heroes, and so that's really great, I think, to underscore that. Have you had to lay off any staff? We have not. We've been hiring, actually. And what tips do you have for smaller food manufacturers on how to do this with compassion? We have rarely had to do this, but in times where we have had to do it, I think it's important to be respectful and supportive of workers and their needs. No ultimatums. There was somebody, a company that we know about, that gave people at the start of this, they said, okay, you have 24 hours to decide whether you're going to stay with us, and if you are, you're good, or if you're not, you're fired and you get 3 weeks severance. I mean, it really set a bad tone, and they ended up with a huge, company issue of just how people thought about the company, and it really created needless problems. They should have been much more sensitive to that. Maximizing financial help through severance and savings. It's tough to do, but having a savings program, like a 401k, I mean, I couldn't do that for so many years, but now it's great that people don't even understand it. Like, production workers often don't think about savings. And then when they do leave, through either their decision or ours, they have, all this money saved up, and it really helps do the transition. If you can just do a little savings programs, CD or 401ks, it's a great help. Helping find other jobs, get in touch, and utilizing the PPP loans and other options to keep people employed is, of course, a good option. And we've even paid COBRA, of somebody, was really experiencing a health problem, and they needed, we weren't sure whether they were going to be able to cover their COBRA. We've paid COBRA for a long time. So those are just some ideas. I'm going to move along quick we've paid classes and retraining of people too. So those are ideas.
Thank you. I know you're going to close this out here with Corey. I have to sign off, but I just wanted to personally say thank you so much. There's some other great questions coming in, and I look forward to doing more with you. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. And we'll raffle off 3 books and knock out these last couple questions, and
yes, I
don't have any discussion.
Thanks.
All right, thanks. Startups mode at this time. Wow, I'm feeling like a startup myself with this book. This book that I wrote launched on April 7th, which was probably the worst time in history to launch any new product. And so I really feel for you. I mean, it's a really tough time, but certainly pursuing e-commerce, is like everybody's sitting at home, and lots more ordering online is one thing that you can do. E-commerce, I was on the board of Miyoko's Kitchen for a long time, and I was a startup board member for her. And in the very start, she makes these great vegan cheeses. They were a total e-commerce company. 100% of their sales were e-commerce before they got into stores. And then that gradually decreased until now it's a very small percent they did. But we did the same thing with Tofurky. So we didn't have distribution early on. We were doing lots of e-commerce. Search for new avenues of revenue. Like I know one company in Portland that was experiencing a drop off because their food service accounts, they were doing sandwiches and salads. They started delivering lunches to corporations on a daily basis. So that's a whole new revenue stream for them. London vegan restaurants have been delivering boxes of veggies on a subscription basis to people's home. You know, it's just a matter of what assets do I have and what can I do differently. There's a wholesaler that just started up in New York City, and then they got hit with this. They turned their whole warehouse into a retail store. So they're selling direct to people now, while the food service industry gets itself going. So really looking at, you know, your business and what business you're in and thinking, what assets can I do? Can I repurpose lines to make other needed items like sanitizer and other masks? But, you know, it's really business just keeping swimming. And the longer you stay in business, the longer you're hanging around, the less stupid you're becoming, and the more you're learning. And, you know, it's just important to turn that key every day. And this is a really tough time. It's the toughest time I've ever seen for, you know, the disruption of business. Food trends during this pandemic of startups should know, for anybody should know, this is what I'm seeing. I mean, people probably have other things that they've seen, but number one, I would say cooking from home. You know, there's so many people that relied on eating out or takeout, and now all of a sudden they're buying cookbooks and finding out, like, how do I cook from home? So that's a big trend. Comfort foods in this time of uncertainty, you know, mac and cheese. Hey, I don't know how much mac and cheese anybody can eat, but I can eat a lot. Plant-based foods, I think, you know, we were on a really big growth spurt. The last 2 years has been like a hockey stick growth for plant-based foods. And now, you know, certainly with especially meat shortages, there's a lot of trial going on, and people are, it's like a big demo. They're like, I can't get my meat belly slice, so I'll take this and buy this. So it's really a great time. And I think we'll come up, you know, above where we were. We won't be selling at the 40% low levels that we have been, but plant-based foods will definitely grow out of the pandemic. And, you know, being an essential food, like, that's a crazy term. We were actually termed a non-essential food by this chain over there in London. And, you know, we thought like protein, we were there, but they're more like pill shops. But I guess what I mean by that is if you have, you know, if you can diversify your line to be included in what people would view as essential food in this time of crisis, or any time, it's kind of a good thing. And then home delivery services, you know, everybody's Instacarting and staying at home. And I think once it's just like Zoom, you're getting used to having food delivered to you or going side pickup. I think these services will really stick. All right. So what impacts have you seen on sales? Here's what we've seen. You know, March and April, retail sales in U.S. mass business, that's like Safeway, or businesses like that, way up, 40% or more up, like incredible. Retail sales, U.S. natural, thing, up in the 40% range of sales. Surprisingly, food service was slightly up. And the reason for that is that we classify some of these home delivery services as food service. So people like Purple Care and Vistro that we're selling direct to people, we're keeping that category going. Canada retail sales also way up in the 40% region. International sales way down, not so much because of COVID, but it's really the strength of the dollar right now. But it's also been, you know, problematic for countries, especially that were hard hit, like I don't know, Germany and France and the UK, to get product to them. But overall for Tofurky, it ends up to about 30% growth over 2019 year to date. So.
Thank you, Seth, so much. We really appreciate you coming on and being here. Like Caroline said, we wish it could have been in person, but hey, we'll take what we can get. Any last words of encouragement or hope for everyone?
Yeah, you know, just like I said, this too will pass. And, you know, if you can just keep swimming. I mean, I swam through some pretty low business times myself, and you know, you just might get to your wild Tofurky moment yourself by just staying in business and every day becoming less stupid. That's all I. So thanks.
Thank you. Everyone, let's do a virtual round of applause. Thank you, Seth. Really appreciate it.
All right.
All right, everyone. Have a great evening. We'll see you all later.